Welcome to MTMG's IT Roundtable, where we bring the power of human connections to the tech world. Our experts become part of your team, so whatever tech problem is keeping you up at night, we can help you solve it.
Joining us today is Christina Garnett. She is the founder and CEO of Pocket CCO, who does fractional chief customer officer for many different brands. I came from the customer success world for the last several years, and so I've watched you on LinkedIn and I thought your work was outstanding.
Thank you.
Very insightful. So I was very eager to have a chance to have this conversation. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to chat.
All right. You have experience in, you know what, let me take a step back. How about you give us a little bit of a background on your career? How did it start? How did you grow into where you are today?
Yeah, so it's a very windy path. It definitely is not linear. I was an English major in college and then actually wound up getting a math teaching position. I'm in a public school right out of college and then taught math for 5 years, first year public, last 4 years private. Took some time off to raise my small children and then had to essentially reintroduce myself into the world to figure out if I wanted to go into teaching or do something different. And my husband had basically since the first 2 weeks that we had started dating and said that I should go into marketing, that I would just naturally deconstruct things and figure out how to fix stuff from a marketing perspective. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was taking every single online course, going to every webinar, reading every single thing that I could, and wound up working with small businesses in my local area to figure out like what was going to be worthwhile for them, what was going to be helpful, what kind of advice I could give them. I was a score mentor because they know they needed someone for social. So I was brought in. And then from there, I was the marketing director for my local SBDC. So not only did I do our marketing and programming for courses, but I also assisted basically everyone that walked in the door from, I had a dream last night and I want to start a business, to, I hate this thing, give me an exit strategy. And so I've had to be able to improv marketing ideas like off the cuff. Like they're not going to say, I wasn't really in the position of, let me tell you what's wrong. And then, oh wait, that sounds great. I'll give you a plan in a week. It's, here's some ideas right off the cuff. Here's what I would recommend. Here's things that you need to be thinking about, which made that muscle very flexible for me. And so after that, I wound up doing my own thing, started my own consultancy for small businesses in the area. And that was great, but I missed the world, the bigger marketing world. While I was doing that, I was brought on to do some playbooks for ICUC, which is a part of the Dentsu Creative Network. And I was doing playbooks and strategy audits for some of their brands. And then it got to the point where they wanted me full-time. So I was brought on full-time as a social strategist and worked with, I have an NDA, so I can't say which brands, but one is a large fintech that you have traded stock on. One is you have 20 of their products in your bathroom. It's a CPG brand. Those are probably my two biggest, but I can't name. And then COVID hit and I was paid to be plugged in and deal with burnout by myself, and wound up writing a piece that was featured in NextWeb about how social media strategists are basically being paid to not unplug, essentially, and why during COVID and issues like that, it's deeply mentally and emotionally draining and unhealthy, and how we need to really re-look at how we look at social media and how that job works, especially in a 24-hour news cycle that may not impact your business per se, but if it impacts your customers, by extension, it does impact you. And you have to know about these things. Was working there, left because of my burnout and just the whole COVID thing. Started working for a startup that's doing quite well called Visit. They do AI lenses for images. So they're able to input data based on your personas and are able to use their AI lenses to scan the images that you audit to see which is going to be more appealing and scroll stopping for your audience. And it was really cool to be able to look through that data and be able to create prescriptive playbooks for clients to specifically say, you have a photo shoot coming, you should try this angle, you should try this color, you should have this in the foreground, you should not be using that kind of font, you should and really have the data to back it up. So that was very cool. And then right after that, during that time period, I blew up on Twitter. I did a tweet about, hey, if you don't have a certain number of followers and you want to meet other people and you're in the marketing space, say hi to Marketing Twitter, and it blew up. And then Brian Halligan found me on Twitter and saw what I was doing. And I was a big HubSpot fangirl, so was able to join the team and built out HubFans, which is an advocacy program. Also created the inbound correspondence program, the after hours show with George P. Thomas, and just really highlighting the beautiful community that's over there. And then left to start my own thing, which is Pocket CCO, as you mentioned earlier. There's been a lot of times in my career where people have tried to poach me, but I've always been like, I would do anything to work with you, but I can't afford you. Or I do anything to work with you, but I don't have headcount for you. Or I don't know if we'd be able to use you full time. And Pocket CCO is for them, for all the people who wanted me in their pocket. It's for them.
I think that's a great way to describe it. And we do some very similar things, but for network IT leadership or infrastructure leadership or things along those lines. So it's a very interesting space, and it's something that is becoming more and more popular these days because people don't have the budget for all of the things they want, but they know there's the talent that I need.
Yeah.
So it's a great role. So I think you found your niche. Your expertise in customer advocacy and community building is obviously well renowned. How do you see the role of community evolving in today's digital first landscape, especially for startups and small businesses?
Yeah. I think AI is going to bring us closer together, not further apart. I think we're going to have growing pains, and I think we're seeing growing pains. But I think because of that, the companies that are able to not reject AI, but to be very critical and protective of what needs to stay human, I think they are in the long run going to be the winners, because people are wanting something to emotionally connect with. And AI, for better or for worse, does not have the emotional tethers necessary to make you feel connected, to make you feel loyal, to make you feel seen, to make you feel heard. And I think for community is always going to be more and more important. Right now, we're seeing community step up for the areas of Western North Carolina. I'm in Virginia, and so I'm safe. I'm fine. We got lucky, but like an hour south of me, and then the rest of Western North Carolina is devastated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing so many people from around the country, from around the world, donating, helping, showing up with supplies, doing everything they can. And so in times of tragedy and times of suffering, you're seeing the community step up. And I think we're seeing that there. I think you're going to continue to see that in the business world too. There's a lot of people that are being laid off. There's a lot of roles that are having redundancies right now. And I see on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn energy I actually like is where I see people lifting up others.
Mm-hmm.
They're giving people kudos. Instead of someone saying they're laid off and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. They're going above and beyond to say, hey, I saw this role, you'd be perfect. Or my network is yours. Who can I connect you with? Or what can I do to help you? Are there resources? Or is there a course that you need to take? Or you think about pivoting? I think community is never going to go away, and the need for it is never going to go away, because we need that, especially in the US. We don't have that third place. We've really destroyed it or monetized it, commodified it to a point where you have to pay for it in order to get to those moments where you feel connected to others. And so community is what we're always going to need. And we're going to continue to see that in tech, in AI, in the future of work, and just wanting to come together. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out what community plays a role is, I think community is it feels like a very casual term, but it's so esoteric, I think, for most people when it comes down to the granular ideas of it. If you think of community as like, where can we show up and be the most human? You'll do a lot of the instinctual stuff that you need to do to create that community feeling.
So true. So true. And so many aspects of life too. And it's everywhere. Now, you've helped Fortune 500 companies and startups.
Yes.
So what do you see as the key differences in your approach when you're working with larger versus smaller corporations?
Honestly, it's time. It's time and adaptability. Large companies, they've been around for a while, so they have this operational structure, which is fantastic. But in the pursuit of protecting itself, it's created a lot of red tape. It's created a lot of unnecessary issues. It's created a lot of backlogs. They're silos. Whereas in the startup world, they don't have all the operational stuff set up, which means they have to almost reinvent the wheel every time they do a process. But at the same time, there's this agility that is so exhilarating, where in corporate, the best idea doesn't always win, because there's all these other caveats that have to be taken into consideration. I love that in the startup world, because of that lack of boundaries, the greatest idea can win. And you can all right, we're executing tomorrow. What do we do first? That's exhilarating to me. I love the startup world for that energy.
Paul and I are very familiar with what you just said.
Little bit.
A few horror stories.
Yeah, one or two. But I have to say, I keep coming back to what you were just talking about on community. And we just recorded a podcast a little bit ago. Actually, I think it has dropped, but with a partner of ours that is in the hospitality space. And their company built an AI tool. And the whole point, well, I shouldn't say the whole point. The big point behind it is it allows the staff that actually touches the public that are coming in to take advantage of the hotel or go to the restaurant or whatever, it frees them up to be able to do that human connection that they alone can do, but takes all the other ones. Hey, how do I get into your parking lot? How do I get tickets to X, Y, or Z? Those pieces off, and the AI can take care of that to free up the humans to really enable that human relationship. So I'm a big fan of that, and I'm seeing it more and more in different industries. But thinking of community-led growth strategies, can you walk us through some key elements of a successful community-led growth strategy, particularly for brands that are just starting?
So I think the main thing to consider is that a lot of the stuff that when you're thinking about a community-led growth plan, a lot of the kind of vernacular and ideas and concepts that you would do or know about as a startup or a founder, you can absolutely tie back into community-led growth, community-led content, all of those things. It's just you need to look at it from a different angle. So if you're a founder, you should know what product market fit is. You should absolutely know what product market fit is. If you don't, please read a book, Google, whatever you're gonna do. But you should know that. For community-led growth and community-led content, you should look at a content market fit, where the market is your audience, your community, who you want to specifically speak to. And so when you are deciding what kind of content you need to be sharing for these people, you need to be able to identify who is this for, what do they like, what are they most likely to behave, how are they going to behave on Pinterest versus TikTok versus YouTube versus Twitter versus LinkedIn versus wherever. And then building all of those data points together to figure out this is what's going to most likely help them and what they're going to engage with. And then I'm going to continue to search and look at the data to see, all right, we posted this and it flopped. All right, maybe we try one more time. And if that flops again too, that does not have content market fit. Maybe it's the format, maybe it's the content itself, maybe it's the copy, maybe it's whatever. But you have to come from an experimental, learning, open-minded mindset in order to figure out, I got to test and see, do we have content market fit? And then once you discover content market fit, then you're able to lean in heavily into what you know works. And so the brands who've done that really well, whether they realize it or not, they've determined content market fit. They come and they follow me because I do this. They love when I post about that. And it could be a meme, it could be a video, it could be a podcast, it could be a specific type of speaker that they highlight or a specific type of customer. But you have to be able to determine content market fit. And you're not going to know that if you're not being hyper-focused on who you're actually talking to. Because right now I'm seeing more and more businesses, because of the economic climate over the past few years, they're trying to expand their TAM at all cost. And so their content is reflecting that, where they're literally throwing everything. They're jumping on memes that their audience doesn't know who Mudang is. Their audience isn't chronically online. So you think what other people are doing that's working for them, and it's not going to work for you because you don't have content market fit. And the trend jumping that we're seeing, it's not necessarily bad, but you have to curate. You have to understand, we're going to make this reference because I know that our audience gets it. Audience is going to get the joke. And so when you're thinking about trends, when you're thinking about content, think about it almost as an inside joke with your audience or community. Are they going to get the joke? They're not going to get the joke. You absolutely should not be posting. Leave it for somebody else. It's okay to say no.
It's so funny because, I mean, we've become so hyper segmented over the last 30 years in everything we do and consume and so on. It's hilarious. I always have a running joke with my wife, which is every year when the Emmy Awards come out, I say, this is the annual show of, should I know that person? Because people, it's not like it was 30, 40 years ago where everybody knew who was on the Emmys. Now it's, wait, what, that person's on what? It's just because you don't happen to watch it. Somebody else does. But anyway, it's I'm glad you brought all of that up, because the next question I think relates directly to it. And that's that it's about social listening, audience intelligence. Your work there is highly acclaimed. So how do you leverage these skills to influence the customer experience, and what tools do you consider essential for effective social listening?
I absolutely love social listening and audience intelligence because leadership wants data. You could have the best idea. You could understand intuitively what these people need. But if you don't have data to back it up, leadership's not going to listen. They just aren't, because they're risk averse. They want to be able to make really smart bets. And without data, it's a bet, not a smart bet. And social listening provides that data, that word of mouth directly from the customer. So you can say, this is a pattern. This is how many mentions we've had with this specific problem. So this isn't user error. This is clearly a CX and UX issue, because we're seeing all of these people having the same kind of problem, trying to do the same kind of job to be done. That's an issue that we need to be thinking about. So what steps can we take in order to figure out what's the problem here? Maybe they're not doing it correctly, but they're not doing it correctly at scale. That's a video tutorial that you can provide. That's a FAQ document that you can create that walks them step by step through it, so that you can essentially give them the resources to help that. Or maybe the system's broken and maybe they're not using the tool as intended, and you need to be able to do an update that is focused on how they're actually using the product. But you need to have that data. For social listening, there are so many tools out there, and some are hyper expensive. Before you jump on a tool, you should have a very clear understanding of what are the different channels where people are talking about you. Do some native searches to see what kind of conversations and how people behave. Because someone on Twitter might yell at support, but someone on TikTok is going to tell you their entire life story and how it's killing them, and then complain about it. It's the same problem, but the way they communicate and tell that story is different because of the platform in which they're using. So knowing how people show up for you and how they talk positively or negatively about you based on how they use that tool, incredibly important. And it's going to help you determine what channels you need to be focusing on versus what's the actual volume of mentions that you would need pull. You need to know what your keywords are. So many people will focus on hashtags and like what hashtags they need in their tweet, but then they never look at keywords to see how their customers are actually talking about them. What are all the different ways that people could talk about you? If you're a shoe company, do people say sneakers? Do they say shoes? Do they say boots? Depending on what keywords you're looking for, the experience, the kind of content you're going to find can be drastically different. And you need to think about how they are talking about you versus how you think they would talk about you. Consumers don't talk about brands the way a marketer would. They talk about the way a consumer would. And so you need to be getting into that mindset. I would absolutely set up Google alerts and Talkwalker alerts for your brands. Those are both free options. And Talkwalker will actually pull more like Twitter stuff in addition to the normal stuff you'd see with Google. But setting up those things and saying, hey, I want to report once a week or once a day or once a month or whatever, so that you can see like major pings is huge. And then figuring out what your escalation process needs to be. So I love a good spreadsheet. Have a list of these are the patterns of the different types of customer experiences, good, bad, ugly, that we keep seeing over and over again. And what needs to happen should we see those when we're monitoring social? Is this a red flag kind of escalation where it's, hey, they say they're going to sue us. I need to immediately send this to this POC and get this taken care of, versus this person's mad. Okay, how do I handle bad versus ugly? How do I know the difference? And then be able to set up an escalation process that everyone on the team understands. This is the protocol that we follow. Here's the legalese that we know we're going to need to use in certain use cases versus others. But it's all about being proactive. The beauty of social listening is that it gives you the means necessary so that you can be proactive for the future instead of reactive. The brands that suffer are the ones that are being reactive. They're the ones that are not taking the time to be thoughtful about the approach, or they use the exact same canned response for every single negative thing they see. It's because they're being reactive, not proactive. And without social listening and without that audience intelligence, you have no idea how to be proactive because you don't know what to look for. You don't know what to be prepared for. And so those would be my best tips for that.
I think that's fascinating. And one thing you just said there at the end that really resonated with me is my wife and I, when we travel, if we're going to a new hotel, we'll read Google reviews.
Yes.
And the ones that respond, not with the canned, we're sorry you felt that way. It's the ones that respond with the, I'm so sorry you saw that, we'll contact, here's my email address, or here, how can we help you solve that? Those are the ones that really resonate for us as consumers.
Yep.
So I think you're exceptionally right. It's important that those hospitality businesses would understand that. It's just an example, but I think you're 100% right. But so you're a fractional CCO for multiple brands.
Yeah.
How do you balance the needs and expectations of various companies all at the same time?
It's about being proactive. It's about being organized, being proactive, and understanding where I can provide the biggest bang for the buck for each of my clients. What do they need from me? What can they expect from me? And then if there's a meeting, I'm very clear about what meetings I can attend, what meetings I can't attend, what does that look like? And then I provide regular updates weekly. So they know exactly what I've done, what the status report is of things, like where they're going and how I'm playing a role in that. And so I'm embedded just like any other full-time employee, but they know that basically they're getting like concentrate instead of the watered down approach. So instead of 40 hours of Christina that's watered down, they're getting like 5 to 10 hours a week of me that's hyper-focused, creating all this really strong content. So they feel like they're getting the full-time experience, but without the bill to associate with that.
Yeah, it's
Well said.
yeah, being here in the present. That's very good. So you've spoken at numerous events, right? Inbound Digital Summit. What are some of the most common themes and challenges that you see companies facing today regarding customer retention and experience?
I think the biggest challenge right now that brands are facing is they do not realize that employee experience has a massive impact on customer experience. You have a lot of brands that they've either laid people off or they have staff that are terrified that the next day they're going to get locked out of their computer, and they know what that means. And so you cannot show up fully for work and show up with full empathy for your customers if you are terrified and stressed out and burned out and worried that tomorrow you may not be able to provide for your family. The biggest problem facing right now is a lot of these companies, they're doing return to office, or they're doing massive layoffs, or they're trying to drive efficiencies everywhere. And the way your employees feel has a direct impact on how your customers feel. They can tell when your employees are burned out. They can tell when they're tired. They can tell when they're stressed. They can tell when they're just like, I don't know if I can take it anymore. They can absolutely tell. And then let's say that they're not burned out, but they did get laid off. A lot of the companies that are laying people off, they're laying off a lot of customer-facing people because they think that can be replaced by AI. But what you're doing is you are telling those customers, you're not important enough. You don't give us enough money for us to put a human in front of you. We are not only automating the customer success team into AI, we are automating your experience as a customer. And as a customer, and you're like, wait, so let me get this right. I can't talk to a human now, and you're upping my rate. So I'm getting a worse experience while you're increasing my bill for you. That doesn't make sense. That is the biggest disconnect happening in brands across the world right now, because they're seeing people as spreadsheet, like line items, instead of that person actually touches 300 customers. That person is actually the face of your company on social, whether you like it or not. That person is the one that rallies and sends like delight, surprise and delight to your customers and makes them love you. That person who writes our legal content so that we are able to say what we need to say to take care of our customers without being fined. But you don't see that. You see them as a line item. And so when you're cutting those people, you're cutting every single customer that's tethered to that person, every single customer that has an emotional connection to that person. And so it's wild, but I'm continuing to see it. They don't realize that all of that stuff creates ripples.
Amazing. Well, the first part of what you said.
So thoroughly agreed. I actually...
Oh, sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say that you and I, our backgrounds are both in sales. And the first part of what you said, I think resonates with us, because you can always tell when somebody is selling something and they don't believe in the product or service.
Yep.
Customers see right through that. Prospects see right through that. And when you do believe in it, they feel it as well. And it's exactly what you just said about if you're speaking to a customer service agent on the phone, And you can just tell that that's the last place they want to be. But I'm sorry, Paul, I cut you off.
Not at all. The other thing I was going to say is I wrote a blog post a couple of months ago about avoiding layoffs because it's more than just that line item. It's about the culture that you're ruining. It's about the loss of institutional knowledge. It's the loss of that human connection. There's so many things that are not taken into account when it's just about the dollars and cents. And one of the reasons Joe and I have this company is we want to give a company all sorts of other ways to save money before they get there. There's so many other ways you can make your technology investments more efficient and optimize them long before you need to get to layoffs. But the challenge is the layoff is the quote unquote easy thing or just the quick thing. And it's not really the right decision many times. Yeah. But I don't want to get on a soapbox and preach too much. But so we're very much in agreement. Your thought leadership is featured in high profile magazines like Forbes and Adweek. How do you ensure your content remains both relevant and impactful in such a fast paced industry?
I think that as long as you tie it into something that is deeply human, it's going to stay relevant. Human needs shift based on like economic conditions, but there's always going to be a human need to feel seen and heard. I don't care if things are booming. I don't care if things are tragic. Humans have this inherent need to feel seen and heard, and empathy is an evergreen skill. And so I think for me, as long as you're coming from a place of how can we show up unapologetically human for people and what does that look like as technology adapts, that's always going to need to be relevant. You're always going to need to balance. You're always going to need to, I'm not a rejection of technology person. I'm not a rejection of AI person. I am what does the balance look like? Because there has to be a balance. And so when I'm writing about content, I'm talking a lot about, I love Inside Out. So I talk a lot about core memories and like how you create these emotional bonds. And technology is not in a position to give us that bond. It can free us up, like you were talking previously, it can free us up so that we have the time to invest in those relationships. But it cannot build those relationships on its own. And so you need to be able to really be careful about what does the customer experience look like in terms of human versus not human. And that need to be able to balance that is not going anywhere because there's never going to be, at least in my lifetime, I think technology is going to continue to advance. It always does. But there are humans who can't even make me feel anything. How are you going to find a robot to do that for me? So I think you're going to look for the empaths. You're going to look for the emotional people. You're going to look for the people who genuinely are able to create emotion in others. And I think that the more technology we use, the more it's going to be clear what we can and can't do. My favorite director, Guillermo del Toro, was at a film festival a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about AI because AI is becoming more and more prevalent in the film space. And he talked about emotionality and how film is art, and art should make you feel something. And so that AI picture is not going to make you feel anything. And so we need to be really thoughtful about what are we actually trying to build? And if we're trying to create emotionality, then we should be looking at how do we be human, because that's what works. That's what converts. That's what makes people behave. Is if you want someone to do something, usually the trigger is an emotional trigger. If I can make you feel this, then I can make you most likely to do that. And that's not something that AI or any of the current technology we have can do right now.
Amazing. My wife's a teacher. For Halloween, she wants to go as one of the characters from Inside Out, but she hasn't decided yet. So.
That's precious.
It's funny that you brought that up. She was just talking about that.
I would be anxiety. I am on.
We said, you should do that, but maybe it's not good to do that with a fourth grade class or whatever. But
yeah, no, the first movie I would be disgust because I love green, and I would just look around and be like, "What are you doing?" And then I saw the second one, I was like, "No, I'm actually anxiety full."
That's great. So, specific example, you helped Hey Orca's social media community grow by over 75% in 13 months. So what specific tactics or strategies did you implement that contributed to such rapid growth?
Absolutely. So one, I have to give it to Alyssa, who's our community manager over there. And she is the human face of the community and does an amazing job. So I would say the first thing is that you have someone on the team that cares and really truly shows up and wants to be a part of those people's lives and help their lives be better. So find really good talent and really passionate people who can do that. That's number one. Number two, we had a lot of meetings talking about and really doing that audience intelligence and that deep dive into what are their needs? Why should they be a part of this? Why would they even want to be a part of it? Because there's so you could throw a rock and hit a community online. How is it different? Why should I join this versus something else? And so we were very hyper focused on really looking at community from their value perspective and what do we need to bring to the table to give them something that's worth joining. And so I think being very community led and a huge part of every single move that we're making. It's not, hey, we want to do this. It's what is the best thing to do in service of the community and the people that we think should be in the community. And so that's been really leveling up. And so I think, like you said earlier, you can tell when people care. And when it comes from that place, you find that there's less ego. You find that there are less people who are trying to be in there to say, hey, look at me. It's more about how can we help each other? It's very much give and take. And so the community is filled with just really lovely people who want to help each other, who don't see each other as competition, but as fellow students, and figuring out social media when feels like it's changing every day. Feels like there's a new algorithm or a new feature update. And it's like a hamster wheel. But what would a therapy session look like for people who are on this social media hamster wheel? How can we provide for them? And so I think that the growth is due to that, and they can feel it. They can feel it's made for them.
That's fascinating. And it really all ties down to one thing you keep talking about through almost every question has been thinking like your customer, thinking like the person that you want to be reaching, not here's the product I need to give you. It's what's their feeling? What is going to be valuable to them?
Yes.
Then working back from there, okay, make sure that we deliver that thing. And I'm seeing a constant thread here, Joe. Yes, but it's really valuable. And it really shows your business. And this has been really enlightening for me, hopefully for our listeners, all two of them. But it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. But now it's time for our more than mere genius questions. Yes, we do love to brand everything MTMG. So these are our more than mere genius questions, all about getting to know Christina as the person. So outside of work, what's a hobby or an activity that you're passionate about?
I am a bit of a cinephile / superhero fangirl. So I'm usually watching a lot of movies or TV shows, or I'm a big Marvel person. And I like DC too, because I was raised on Batman, the animated series. So I'm watching The Penguin, but I'm also watching Agatha all along because Scarlet Witch is my favorite character. And just trying to disassociate in fiction is probably the best or worst way to put it. And then I hang out with my family. Those are my things.
Great. You're going to love question number 7. That's coming up. But in the meantime, name one book or podcast that has inspired you.
Anything by Rory Sutherland. I absolutely love behavioral psychology. So Alchemy is huge, but I'd watch Rory Sutherland open an envelope. Anything that man says is brilliant. And he comes from a very behavioral psychology kind of perspective and the idea of nudging and stuff like that. So anything by Rory Sutherland, he's an absolute genius.
That's a great one. Who's been an important mentor for you at any point in your life?
I got to go with David Armano. I was lucky enough a couple years ago that we've been following each other on social for a while. And I asked him if he wanted to be my mentor, and he's kind and brilliant and is seeing a lot of the roadblocks that I had ahead of me. And so I was able to bounce ideas off and be am I going crazy or is this not good? And you need someone who's a few steps ahead, and he's probably miles ahead of me, but he makes it feel like he's only a couple steps ahead of me and is able to help. So it's got to be David.
Which talent that you do not have would you most like to have?
My husband's an illustrator. So to be able to create art would absolutely be that for me. I can sing, I danced for 10 years when I was a little girl. I can write, I can do all the other things. Creating art, I have absolutely no talent. I can't draw. I can color in the lines. That's about as good as it gets. But watching, because my daughter also paints and stuff like her dad, watching them create something from nothing, it looks like magic when you don't have that skill. So it would absolutely have to be that.
It is an important skill and one that I definitely do not have either. But if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Edinburgh, Scotland. I love Scotland. It's my favorite place.
Fantastic.
Lived there for 6 months, right south of Glasgow in a town called Ayr. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm going back in December. I'm very excited.
Great. Are you going for the Edinburgh Christmas market?
I'm going to see David Tennant in Macbeth again. I went and saw him in February, and then they relaunched the show at a different theater. And so I got tickets again, so I'm going to go see that. And then my husband's never been to Scotland, so we're taking the train to Edinburgh and spending a few days there and stuff like that. But I also get to see the Christmas markets, which is like a bonus.
The Edinburgh Christmas market is amazing. So I'm very jealous, but go
I'm very
enjoy.
excited.
What profession other than yours would you love to try?
It's a really good question. I want to say writer, but I feel like I have enough of my toe in that I can be an imposter enough to say I'm a writer. I like the idea of I did teach, but I'd love to be like a professor in college, and maybe in another life, I'll teach at Virginia Tech or something and teach marketing.
I think you'd be good at it. Now, to that question you alluded to earlier, who is your favorite superhero?
I have 3, but my number 1 is Scarlet Witch. So I love the Scarlet Witch. I love Wanda. I also love Jean Grey / the Phoenix / the Dark Phoenix, and I want them to do her story justice. And then for DC, it's Batgirl. I love a fiery redhead that makes her own path. It's like my entire comic book persona is that.
I have to say, you're probably the most prepared for that question anybody that we've had.
I'm a nerd. I'm ready.
What is your favorite sound?
My favorite sound is babies when they're like, I miss it with my kids, and I see it every now and then on TikTok or others, but it's when the baby is too young to speak, but they laugh, and they laugh with their entire self. And it is the sound of pure joy. That is my favorite sound, is a baby laughing. Yeah. It's like the most purest thing on the planet. Yeah.
Agreed. What is your favorite song when you're stressed or you need a lift?
My 2 favorite songs are While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I'm a massive Beatles and George Harrison fan, as you can see. But also Time by Hans Zimmer. I got to see Hans Zimmer a couple weeks ago, and Time actually stops time for me. It is transcendent. And listening to one of those 2 songs, it'll get me through just about anything.
So most people, when they answer these questions, they have to sit there and pause and say, you're right there. Wow. We could ask you anything. But
Throw the gauntlet at me.
yeah, so this is our favorite question. What is the one thing that you most want to be known for after you are gone?
I hope I made things better. I hope I left the world better than how I found it. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Well said.
Mic drop. I think that was very well said, and I really appreciate it. I think you really know your stuff. You were kidding at the beginning that you had that wandering career to get to where you are, but I think you've definitely found your place.
Thank you.
And I think your customers are much better off for it. And we'll make sure in the show notes people know how to get in touch with you once they hear this and they want to reach out to you and hopefully hire you for themselves. But this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you for joining us. If today's discussion resonated with you, please consider giving us a 5-star review. Your feedback not only supports our show, but also helps others find us. Thank you so much for listening to MTMG's IT Roundtable. We look forward to bringing you more conversations soon. Until then, take care, and know our team is always here to help. Sláinte
MTMG, guidance that empowers.